A very good afternoon to you. This is, of course, Jamie on the chat trap, the final few minutes of the show, actually. But do not worry because we got a lot more amazing conversation coming out right up just for you. Now, with that being said, before I leave, today we've been talking about a very interesting topic. We've been talking about poverty and how we can alleviate poverty and, what we can do as individuals to ensure that, the standard of living per se is a little bit better than it was yesterday. Now, with that being said, um, in general, one thing that I do want to address is a lot of people have the question as to, okay, poverty is a natural thing, we can't really do anything about it, but I do want to talk about key solutions or what we can do as a human race, as an international community, in order to make the goal of alleviating poverty or getting rid of poverty or ending poverty in all forms. To get to that goal, to make it a reality, there are a few key solutions that like we need to be aware of, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about in this final few minutes of the show. And the first thing that I do want to talk about, that I touched on earlier, is equality and representation. Now, I told you earlier how a lot of people tend to disassociate equality, disassociate representation with poverty. They seem like two completely different issues, but I told you how at the end of the day, the reason why we have such poor people in the world, the reason why the rates of poverty, the amounts of people that are suffering due to poverty are increasing day by day, is because there is no equality and representation. Now, one of the main causes of for extreme poverty is actually marginalization. Now, this for me, I heard a few days back, and I thought it was absolutely interesting. This concept of marginalization interlinked with the idea of poverty. Now, see, what exactly happens is that when the reason people are so poor is because there are systematic barriers that lead to groups of people going without representation, or having unfairnesses that they have to deal with on a day-to-day life. Now, in order for a community or a country to work its way out of all the poverty, then all groups must be involved in the decision making process, especially when it comes to having a say in things that determine a person's place in society. Now, which is why we see a lot of underdeveloped countries that do not have a proper system of say politics or governance. We see a lot of countries like that suffer the most with regards to poverty. But I also reminded you that when we hear the phrase, we as people that do live in a developed nation, we tend to uh, naturally assume that poverty is something that only exists in developing nations or not so developed nations. Whereas I showed you the truth, I told you how there's more than 4 million people in the UK in itself that lives a life below the ideal standard of living and earns below the amount that is necessary for a person to function on a good level on a day-to-day basis. So one thing that all of us can do, including states, including governments, including a nation as a whole and the international community as a whole, to alleviate poverty, to end poverty, is to ensure that there is no inequality, there is no inequality rather, and that there is more representation for all types of people from all backgrounds. Now, with that being said, I do want to see one thing that I also wanted to talk to you about is what you can do to help this global issue that we're facing, which is poverty. And one thing that I do want you to understand is with equality, you can definitely play your part. As an individual, I know it kind of seems overwhelming sometimes, and there only seems to be so much you can do to help the extremely poor out there. But trust me, if you are interested enough, there are definitely things that you can do to help some poor people live the life that they deserve, live a normal, human, satisfactory life. Now, one thing that in my personal opinion, I think absolutely is important in order to end poverty as a whole is education. Now, we see that there are a lot of children in the UK in itself that barely have the bare necessities that is required in order to go to school and conduct your education properly. Now, one thing that you can do is maybe find a family like this, maybe find some students that are desperately in need of, say, college money or even basic uh, uh, funds to fund their basic necessities. If you can find students or families like that, make sure that you do reach out, okay? Because when you do reach out, no matter how small it is, you are contributing to, in the long run, end poverty. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Another reason or cause, or uh, um, basically another cause for poverty is, well, of course, climate. Okay, poverty is most likely to occur where there is a high combination of marginalization and risk. Now, this risk is being its own combination of persons or group level of vulnerability and the hazards they face. So, natural disasters or climate change issues are certain things that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in their lives. Not just COVID. COVID is, I mean, all of us have understood the fact that with COVID, a lot of people did lose their jobs, a lot of livelihoods were destroyed. And apart from COVID, another reason that people are getting poorer and poorer is because of the changes in the climate, or changes in what used to be. So, for example, for farmers, there are so many differences in the weather pattern, there are so many differences in climate, which affects their daily crops or whatever. That was just one example, but definitely natural disasters, climate change is obviously a hazard that people do face that deprives them from achieving that proper place in society. Now, with that being said, again, I want to remind you to do whatever it takes, even in your little small way, to reach out to somebody that does need your help, right? Because at the end of the day, we already spoke about this. We spoke about how important it is for you to be kind, and not just because you can put a smile on somebody else's face, which is absolutely amazing if you could do that as well. But additionally, it's also good for your mental well-being. Now, speaking of your own mental well-being, I want to talk about something that, that I deem to be extremely important. Okay, and that is the answer to this question that I have had lingering in my mind, which is, do you learn from mistakes? Okay, so a mistake is basically something that we do that is misguided, or act on our judgment. And as long as we exist, we make mistakes consciously and unconsciously. And that's just the part of being a human being, and there's nothing that we can change about it. Now, I did speak about this earlier on. I touched on it actually, but I do want to get into depth from it, because I feel like a lot of us are so engaged in the mistakes that we have done in our past that we fail to move forward, right? See, at the end of the day, if it's an unconscious mistake, those are some mistakes that we made because of the lack of knowledge or experience. Uh, it could be as trivial as not knowing what to eat for dinner, not being indecisive to pick your dinner for today, or it could be as significant as choosing the wrong subject for your college, or choosing the wrong path in your career. So, see, at the end of the day, whatever it is, I promise you that every single human being at some point of their life, no matter how successful, no matter how brilliant, have made such mistakes. Now, the only thing that you can do, a mistake that made, is cannot be changed. There's absolutely nothing you can do to change what's in the past. But what you can do is ensure that that won't happen today onwards, and that we can do whatever it takes to better the situation. So if you did something that you aren't necessarily proud of, then think to yourself, instead of wallowing in self pity, and instead of always thinking about, oh no, what have I done? Instead, what you could do is think about, okay, what can I do in order to make the situation better? Now, if you could do that, I promise you that your mistakes are all going to seem trivial, and you are going to live a better life in general. But with that being said, it's about the time that I bid you goodbye. It's about time for me to head on out of here. But we got Nick coming up, and he will keep you very good company, keeping you updated with everything that is going on as well.